This is part 2 of building a responsive testimonial slider, and we've already, part 1 we've covered the HTML, and now in part 2 we're going to go over the CSS, and we're going to go over that right now. If you haven't seen part 1, I recommend checking that out first. As I mentioned in part 1, the final solution is going to be available in my GitHub as a repository, so be sure to check that out in the description below. But without further ado, we can go ahead and get started with that CSS. So where we left off is we added the HTML and everything's a bit blown up. The image is massive, and we want to start to make it look more like a slider, where we then finish off with the JavaScript in part 3. And so we're going to get started with that. Now with CSS, how we want to approach this is we want to go ahead and use a, really start outward and work our way inward. So we start with the most broadest CSS rule sets that we see here, like universal selector, and then work our way slowly inward with all of the different classes and different types that we have. So we're going to start with the universal selector, and this is just going to get some CSS reset to our file. And so we're going to add a box sizing of border box. This is going to make sure the padding and border don't mess up the element size. And then we're going to add margin of 0 and padding of 0. And this is just going to give us a baseline to as we move forward. Next, we're going to go ahead and add the body. And we're going to go ahead and just give this a background color of a darkish gray. And then we're going to go ahead and give a margin of 0. We can actually remove that since we've already have margin. We can say font family sans serif, color a dark gray. Next, we're going to work on the testimonial container. And in the HTML, since we use a lot of divs to wrap a lot of our elements, we're using classes to give a bit more context about what we're building. And that's what we're going to be styling now. To style with a class such as testimonial container, you're going to want to start with a period. So these are just standard element selectors. Now we're getting into classes, and so we're going ahead and starting with a period to target that class. And so we can go ahead and add max width 1200 pixels, and that's going to limit how wide the slider can be. And then we're going to say width of 90%, and it's going to take up 90% of the screen width that we have. We're going to give it a margin of 2 rem auto, where we're adding some space top and bottom, and we're centering as well. And then we're going to go ahead and use display flex. Flex is helpful to organize elements on a page. And the other option you can use, is display grid is really popular, but flex, you can build an entire website with flex, and that's what we're using today. So we're going to do flex direction, column. Then we're going to say align items, center, and then overflow hidden. This is going to hide anything that sticks out of the container. We just want to make sure it's all, nice and tidy. Okay. Next, we're going to work on the testimonial card. So within the container, we have the card, and then we have the controls. And we're going to start working on the card first, and then eventually get to the controls later. But I want to first get this a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, and then we can show this as well in this recording, so you can have an idea as we're building this out. So we're going to do background color of white. We're going to give it a border radius of 12 pixels. We're going to give a box shadow of 0, 12 pixels, 30 pixels, and RGBA 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.05. And this is just going to be a shadow of black with a slight opacity. And then we're going to go ahead and add a display of flex. We're going to do flex direction column. So another thing I wanted to mention too is as we're building this out, we're going to be working on mobile first and then slowly working our way up with tablet and desktop. We're going to later add media queries for tablet and desktop, but right now we want to work with mobile. Generally, that's the recommended approach unless you have a really good reason to start with desktop. But for the most part, you want to start with mobile, and then it's going to be easier to then stylize tablet and desktop with the extra space that you have on the screen. So we're doing column, and then we're going to go ahead and use align items to center from left to right. So align items, center, and then we're going to center the text as well, text align center. And then we're going to give it a width of 100% and padding of 1 rem. With rem, you're taking the font size of the browser, and as a default, that's going to be 16 pixels. So 1 times 16 is 16. And with rem, it's helpful, or em, either one of those is going to be helpful because oftentimes the size of the font will dictate the overall how everything will be sized. And so you can use rem and em to use with something like padding to adjust based on the size of the font. Next, we're going to do gap of 1 rem. Gap is useful because it's adding space between items, and padding is space around items. And so the benefit of gap is it's just between. So that is something to keep in mind there. And then we have height of auto, and it's just going to adjust based on the element. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and move towards the image. We're going to, let's go ahead and just put this over so we can start to see this take shape. So it's already coming together. We want to shrink this image, so we're going to start working on that. Testimonial image, and we can go ahead and add flex of none. This prevents any stretching from happening. We want to go ahead and give width of 100%. Then we're going to say aspect ratio 1/1, and that's going to make it a square size. Then we're going to make it min height of 300 pixels. And then we're going to give it a background color of this lighter gray. And then we're going to say overflow hidden. We don't want to see anything. So overflow hidden is going to be helpful because we're going to make this object fit of cover. So it's going to keep this image size as it scales. And if the image might be not the same dimensions as the container, and so we're using overflow to chop anything off. So then we're going to say testimonial image, and we're going to target the image within the container, and we're going to give it a width of 100%, a height of 100%, object fit of cover, like I mentioned, and that's going to get that positioned correctly. And then we're going to say display block. Great. So now it's starting to look more like the slider. We do want to start styling the content as well, and so we're going to get to that, and then we're going to then eventually wrap up with the controls and then the media queries for the tablet and desktop. But let's go ahead and move over to the testimonial content, and I've named that aptly testimonial-content just to keep everything organized. And we're going to go ahead and give it a flex of none, a display of flex. Flex direction is going to be column, so it's going to stack everything for mobile. We're going to justify the content, space between, and then we're going to align items center. Now we're going to go ahead and add the business name, and we're going to give it a font weight of bold, and that's going to be that Gato Gourmet Delights. So font weight of bold, it's going to increase that thickness. Font weight of bold, margin bottom of 0.5 rem, font size 1.2 rem, and there we go, we've increased it. Now we're going to go ahead, we've given it some space underneath for the other text, and then we've increased the size. Now we can go ahead and work on the quote underneath. And that's, with CSS, like I mentioned, we're working our way inwards, and then, just, in a natural progression, we've started outwards, and now we've gotten to the container for the content, and then we're tackling each one of these to make sure it looks the way we expect, the way it looks in the final solution, like so. And so that's, a great way to approach the CSS. So now we're going to go ahead and give it a color of a darker gray. We want to make the font size a little bit smaller. We're going to give it 0.8 rem. We're going to go ahead and give a line height of 1.5. That's going to add space between the lines. And then we're going to go ahead and give it margin bottom of 1 rem. Now we can go ahead and add testimonial profile, and that's going to be a width of 100%. Display flex direction, column, align items we want to center, and we want to give a border top of none. Later on, you'll see in the final solution, there's a little bit of a border that we add just for some distinction from the quote. But for mobile, we don't really need that. Just personal preference. And so we've gone ahead and gotten rid of it. And so that's why we're putting none for mobile now, but later we will use border top to add a border. So that's why we want to place it now. Next, we can go ahead and give a name work on the name, and we can say padding top of 5 pixels. We can say font weight of bold, and we want to give it a color of, a darker color, and we can use 111 for this. Perfect. Now we can move on to the role or the position, and we're going to just give that a color of a gray, and that'll be it for that. And now we can move on to the controls as the final step before we move on to the media queries. And so we can say testimonial controls, and we will target within the container of testimonial controls. We're going to target the button, or actually let's do the container first and work our way inward. Testimonial controls. Okay, and we can go ahead and we can give a margin top of 1 rem, and that's going to be, we can scroll here. We're going to give some margin separation. As you can see, we move that. We can go ahead and make it display flex, justify content center, and then gap of 1 rem, and that's going to be between the two controls, giving some space. Now we can go ahead and work on the button, and we're going to give it a border of 1 pixel solid gray. We're going to make the arrows white, so we give it a color of white. We're going to give it a background color of that 333 again. We want to curve the edges, so we're using border radius to do that. Border radius is going to be 50%. We have padding 0.6 rem and 0.9 rem, just to add some extra space between the border and the arrow, and you'll see that. Border radius of 50% is also going to curve and make it a circle, and that's how you get that circle look instead of just a square or rectangle. So we're doing border radius in combination with the padding to make that circle to look the way it is. Then we're going to work on the font size, 1.2 rem. It's going to make the arrows a bit bigger. And then we're going to say cursor pointer, because we want the user to click on it and the pointer is going to look, much better for clicking versus the standard arrow. Then we're going to add a transition, and this is going to be useful for, we can say all 0.3 seconds ease, and this can be in conjunction with hovering. So we want a transition to happen when it's hovered, and so we're going to say, dot testimonial controls button hover, and we're going to just give it, just make it background color like so. And so, when we hover, it's going to, update the background color. We could honestly just say, all or background color should be fine. Like so. Should still work like so. So we're targeting the hover, and we're saying, when we hover over, we're going to slightly lighten with this, going from 333 to 444, and we want to, slowly transition to that. And so that's what we're doing here. So either one works, they both work. And we can keep moving forward. So we've done the controls, and we've gotten mobile finished. Now we want to go ahead and work on tablet and desktop. And so we're going to go ahead and work on that now. There's just some slight adjustments that you need to do for the bigger size. And to use, make responsiveness, we're using @media, and we're going to say min width for tablet of 600 pixels and max width of 124 pixels. That's what I've picked, for my tablet responsiveness. Those are the dimensions. So once this increases in size to between 600 and 1024 pixels, we're going to be in tablet territory, and these styles are then going to override or apply with when the user's using tablet. So we're going to go ahead and say testimonial card. We want to adjust that. We want to give a bit more padding. We'll say padding of 2 rem. We want to make the height auto, and that's going to be it for testimonial card. Now we want to go ahead and work on the content within the card, testimonial content, and we can say padding 0 and 1 rem. Now we're going to go ahead and work on the quote. And we can say we want this quote, so we had it smaller for the phone sizes. Now we want to make it bigger. So we're just saying 1.3 rem, like so. So we're making those adjustments. It's going to get a bit bigger for this, tablet size. And then we're going to go ahead and just add some margin bottom of 1.5 rem, a bit more space. We can work on the business name, and we can give it a font size of 1.4 rem. We can work on the testimonial profile, which is going to be the text. It's container holding Whiskers Meow and Chief Food Taster. We're going to say we want the width to be 80%, and then we want the margin of the top to be 1 rem. A little bit more space. Then we're going to work on the buttons. So testimonial controls and the button, or the 2 buttons down below. And we're going to give it a font size of 1.4 rem. And we want to give some padding as well. We'll say 0.7 rem and 1 rem, like so. Just a little bit of an adjusted size for the buttons. And now we can wrap up with the image, testimonial image. Up here, testimonial image. We want to target the image. Let's go ahead and just make this, max height of 1,000. So this is just preventing the image from getting too tall. Now we can go ahead and work on desktop, and we can say @media min width of 1025 pixels. So it's going to be now greater than, we reached 1024. As soon as we hit 1025, that's when we hit desktop. And so let's wrap up with those styles. And we can just, make this bigger since we won't be able to see those. But we can go ahead and say, we can just increase the size here. And let's go ahead and fix that. As you can see, this is what desktop looks like. We need to adjust that now. So we're going to go ahead and first work on the card. That's the good place to start. Within the card, we want it to be flex direction row instead of a column because we have that more space. We want to stretch the item, so align items, stretch, and it's going to make the image and the content the same height with stretch. Then we can go ahead and say text align left. We want everything to align on the left side, or the text to align on the left side. We're going to give it a height 600 pixels, and then we're going to give it a min height of 550 pixels. So card's not going to get too short, but we're also going to, set a fixed height as well. And that's starting to come through. Now we can go ahead and work on the testimonial image. And we can say flex 1.2. And we can say this is going to allow the image, to take up a little bit more space than the text, but we're going to give it, a height of 100%. And we're going to see that. And then we're going to go ahead and work on, that was the container. Now let's work on the image. So dot testimonial image, and we're going to make it the width 100% of the container. We're going to make it the height 100% of the container as well. We're going to max height, get rid of that. We're going to say none. There's no restriction. Aspect ratio is just going to be auto, the natural image ratio, whatever's the default. We're going to say object fit cover. We want to fill the space without any distortion, any stretching, all of that. So it's just covering, scaling and covering. And you'll see those adjustments there. Now we can go ahead and start working on the content. Since it's too large there, we want to say testimonial content. We want to say flex of 2. It's going to give more space, take up more space in the image. Flex 1.2, and this is flex 2. And we're going to say align items flex start. That's going to align the content to the left-hand side. Now we're going to work on the testimonial profile. That's going to be this section here, Whiskers, Meow, and Chief Food Taster. That's currently in the center. We want to move it over to the left-hand side, and so that's what we're going to be doing right now. So testimonial profile, we want to give it a width of 60%. We want to align the items at the start, as I mentioned. And then, as I mentioned as well earlier, we're giving a border, so one pixel solid. We'll use that 333 again. So we're adding that top border, like so. Moving it over, adding the border, and now we're just going to adjust the quote. We can make it bigger with the extra space. And so we're going to just finish that off with dot quote. And we want to just give it a font size of 2 rem. Like so. Okay. And so that is the final solution. Looks like the final solution needs that border. But this is the final bit. And we're going to now, in the JavaScript in part 3, we'll work on swapping between the sliders, as you can see. We're going to work on that final bit. And, I just added, this border just for extra aesthetics, that we want to, use. And you'll see, if we inspect, this will be tablet. And then we have we have mobile as well. So that's the CSS. Appreciate you watching. Stay tuned for part 3 with the JavaScript, and we'll wrap up this project. Have a great day.